Hello, hello, and welcome to Latina Mental Health Series. You're here with your host, Norma Garcia. As you're all coming in, please make sure to tell us where you're from, where you're joining, what city or state are you in, and what are you looking forward to learning today. Let's take a look in terms of who's here. So usually I've been doing these series on Tuesday evenings. However, as of this week, we have switched into Thursday evenings. So for those of you that are here today, I'm happy that you're here. For any of you, if this is your first time, welcome. This will be a 30-minute presentation in which I will present on a specific topic related to mental health, which I will first start off with introducing myself, giving you information, and then leaving some room for Q&A. For those of you that have joined me in my previous webinars, I'm so happy that you're here with me again today, and I appreciate you being flexible with me transitioning from Tuesdays now to Thursdays. So I see here we are tuning in from San Antonio, Texas, Arizona, New York, Indianapolis, another from Texas. Ooh, an MSW, love it. I'm also I'll go shortly in terms of like my profession, but I am also a licensed clinical social worker. I see quite a few people from Arizona. Ooh, I see my best friend joining in from Lake Balboa. Thank you for being here. More California, Chicago, LA. One of my team members, Coach Sammy, thank you for being here as well. Already loving the energy that's in here, and even just from all the different places that you're all tuning in from. Today will be a very heavy topic. So I just want to, take the time to just make sure that we're honoring ourselves. In no shape or means, right, is my presentation meant to be able to serve as a therapy session. I'm here today to provide psychoeducation tools and techniques surrounding grief and loss. I'm also hoping to provide this as a safe and comfortable space for you all to be able to talk about such a very difficult, emotional, intense, topic. Even for me myself, I will say that I came in with very much heaviness, but I'm excited that all of you guys are just so brave and just wanting to share this space and be in the presence of all of you amazing individuals that already are here showing up. Awesome. I see more people from Florida, Texas. All righty. All right. So as you guys continue coming in, just share where you're from. Throughout, I will also be mindful in terms of, paying attention to the chat, making sure that I'm responding to any questions that come up as I'm presenting. If I don't get to it right away, I'll make sure to make time at the end. And even at the end, if we still don't have time, I will make sure to get back to you within 24 hours. So again, today's topic is related, it's on Latinas and grief, navigating loss and finding support. I know already that I've had a lot of people already, commenting and talking about, their experience in terms of grief. And I welcome you to use this space to, share your story. If you want to share and talk about your own grief, I welcome that. At any point, if anything that I'm talking about, it triggers you, it brings up some emotions, because it certainly will. I hope you take the time to take care of yourself. If you need to step away and need to come back, today is a day that I really want you to pay attention to what's coming up for you and making sure that you are doing things to take care of yourself. So, all right. So let me begin by introducing who I am. For those that already know me, you will continue getting to know me each week. And so again, my name is Norma. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and an inner healing coach for Latinas. For the past 10 plus years, I've worked in numerous community mental health agencies, working with the most underserved, underprivileged communities. I spent a lot of my time, making sure that I provide culturally sensitive and trauma-informed interventions with my clients. I am based in the city of, oops, my light just went out. So I am based in the city of Los Angeles, California. And so most of my work has been here in California. I am very passionate in helping high achieving first gen professionals in their healing journey. A mission of mine is to continue advocating for mental health, breaking generational trauma, which is a topic that I also did present a few weeks ago, and also just to continue empowering Latinas and women of color to make sure that they heal themselves. All right. So, like I mentioned, today we're going to talk about grief. So, first, I'm going to begin by just, I'm starting with really just introducing what grief is. So, grief is a natural response to loss. It's the emotional suffering that we feel when something or someone that we love is taken away. So, usually when we think of grief, right, we associate it with being someone passing away or dying. But I do want to also acknowledge that there's different types of losses that we may experience. It may not be, excuse me, it may not be just losing the physical presence of someone. Other types of losses, right, can be divorce, it could be relationships, friendships, losing your job, losing your home. I know many of us also, have pets, and so also losing our pets who are just like family is also a loss. Different transitions that you go through, someone becoming, physically ill. Losing your sense of safety after trauma. So there's just different ideas of what a loss can be. These are different experiences that you can have when you're going to experience loss. For today, we're going to be focused more on the loss of someone in the physical world, but the concepts that we're going to go through can apply to all of these different types of losses. And like I mentioned, at any point, if you have any questions, if you want me to slow it down or further explain, just make sure I'll be watching the chat for any of that as well. All right. So something that I like to teach in terms of understanding grief, and many, if you're familiar with this, these are the stages of grief. Now, there's belief, some people say there's 5 stages, some people say there's 7 stages. I believe that there is more than these stages. However, a psychiatrist by the name of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She came up with these stages of grief, right? And what these stages does is that it just helps normalize what we're experiencing as we grieve, right? And so this doesn't mean that you have to follow these stages or that even these stages is a linear process, right? It's not like it's step 1, step 2, step 3. As we know, for those that have experienced grief, right? Grief is not linear, right? It's not something that, there is a specific, formula in which, we're going to be able to grieve. There's just, strategies and techniques that can help the grieving process. And so the way that it is formatted is that there's these 5 stages. And so when you are grieving, you go through these stages. So the first stage that was established is the stage of denial, right? Of shock, right? This is like your initial response when you hear the news of something, happening. And usually this is a defense mechanism that we have as a way to try to process, right? Process the grief that is going on. It's really hard, to accept, that we lost someone or that we lost something. And a thought that comes connected to that can be like, this can be happening to me, right? Then we have bargaining, right? And this stage of bargaining is like, it's a way like you try to negotiate, like, if I would have done this, then perhaps this would have not happened. If they, let's say if, your loved one had an illness, and so that bargaining would be like, if they would have gone to the hospital sooner, if I would have taken them sooner, perhaps they would have still, been alive. And so it's like those what ifs, right? Like, what if I would have done this, right? And this bargaining stage, the way that it helps you is it helps you to hold on hope in a situation of very like intense pain. Um, Another stage that happened is anger, right? Once, it kind of starts settling in, there's this sense of anger of like, why is this happening? Why me? Why did I deserve this? Why did this person, have to go? Why did it have to happen to them? Right. So anger is a real emotion that comes up from in the grieving process. From anger, it goes into depression, right? Where you get this intense you know, um, emotion of sadness, of sorrow. This is when you start really facing, right, and understanding and processing, right, the loss. And just to note too that all of these stages can be happening all at once. Right. It doesn't mean that it goes from 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. All of these things can be happening at one. You can like you can make steps forward and you can go steps back. Like grief is something that is like a roller coaster, right? Because our emotions are just like up and down. Um, and then the last, stage is of acceptance, means that here you start acknowledging the loss and processing and learning how to live without your loved one. Now, this stage, right? All of these stages, they're very difficult, but especially the acceptance phase, right? It's like, wait a minute, like, how am I supposed to accept that this happened? How am I supposed to accept that this person is no longer here, right? So it is something that does take time, right? And just because you accept something doesn't mean that you're okay with it. What it means is that you're at peace, right? And you begin to understand and adjust to your new reality. Okay. So, such as some common symptoms that we may experience when we grieve, there's an emotional part, and there's a physical part, right? The emotions, as you can imagine, right? I'm sure if I were to ask you, what are some emotions that come up for you or came up for you when you were grieving? Um, Sadness, emptiness, the sense of like, feeling like like a zombie. You're not sleeping, you have anxiety, you feel lonely, a lot of crying, you're unstable. um, a huge one here that is also part of the stages, right, is that you may experience a sense of guilt or regret, right? Guilt that perhaps maybe you said something that you regret, or maybe you didn't tell that person that you loved them enough. Perhaps it could be, if let's say your loved one was ill, right, and them, passing away or dying, right, it relieved them from having to be suffering, right? And sometimes that guilt can be like, because perhaps that was the best thing that that needed to happen, and feeling guilty that you wish that that person was now at peace, resting. Also feeling guilty for feeling like that you couldn't have, that you didn't prevent, this from happening. So guilt is one of the number one emotions, along with sadness and anger, that is part of the grieving process. And it is something that you have to learn how to work through, because guilt is a normal reaction from grief. So I really wanted to highlight that part. Um, and also, the physical symptoms that we may have, right? We may lose weight, we may, have pain, insomnia, nausea, fatigue, right? And so, as you can see, right, the stages is it's not linear, right? It feels like in a roller coaster. I want you to know that these stages aren't meant to be like necessarily like a formula. It's more that these stages help normalize what you're going through. It gives us a name to understand, like, okay, yes, this sounds like I'm in this. This is what I'm experiencing right now. So just having an understanding, and normalizing what that is like for you can help in terms of the grief. And so another thing unique is that grief is a highly individual experience, right? That we all are going to experience it differently, and that we all can expect that because what worked for me is going to necessarily going to work for somebody else. So I do want to also normalize that as well, that we're all very unique in the way that we're going to process and grieve and cope with the loss of our loved ones. Awesome. So I'm just gonna take a moment and just check in the chat to see if there's anything, that's coming up for anyone. I know we just started talking about just the stages and the normal reaction. So I see here that, yeah, accepting isn't giving up, contrary to the popular belief. Yes, absolutely agree. Um, um, Thank you for discussing this topic. Grief is something I'm learning about and can currently relate to, especially since I lost my mother 3 months ago. I'm so sorry to hear that. And I'm glad that you're here, as a way to learn how to continue, process and grieving the loss of your mother. Awesome. Okay. So something to consider as we are grieving, right? As I said, it is a unique experience for all of us. We also want to understand that there's cultural considerations, right? That our culture, that our religion, our spirituality, all of those things are going to influence and affect, right, how we grieve. Something specifically with the Hispanic, culture, right? And when I say Hispanic, Latino culture, this could mean a lot of different, like I myself am Mexican American, so I know I have, we have our own traditions, and some of it is also it's relatable, to like Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, right? We think of all Latin America, but there is some similarities. Is that we have this sense of familialismo, in which we use our support from our extended family, especially when a loss happens. We come together as a family, las tías, los tíos, los vecinos. Like there's a whole community of support that comes together in terms of like how we're going to grieve and honor our loss. Um, it's also about the beliefs that we have, when someone does pass away, right? That we believe that the spirit, lives within us, that, once that our loved ones are gone, that their memory still lives within us. There is a process that we call de luto, right? That for long periods of time, right, we're in this phase of like grieving, estamos en luto, and we're finding ways to honor our loved ones and find ways to be able to move forward with this immensely profound pain, that we have. And I do want to say, right, with grief, right, there's no time frame, right? And I'm not here to say that it ever gets easier. It's just that it's a process that unfortunately, we all experience at some point in our lives. And it's one of the most, impactful, transformative, life-changing experiences that we can ever, go through. Let me remove this banner because it is blocking. There we go. When we think of also, our religion, for any that, are, in terms of Latino culture, right? The main religion is Catholicism, among other ones as well. But typically the rituals are when someone dies, right? You call the priest, viene el padre, they have them, sit with our loved ones, right? They do a prayer. And we think about also when our loved one goes away, right? Kind of like the process of what happens, right? There's a viewing, there's mass, there's a procession to the burial site. After that, there's usually like a celebration. And then there's a novenario, which is, 9 days after, our loved one is gone, right? Together as a family, as a community, we come together and we pray. So this is just, giving you the rituals and traditions that are typical in the Latino culture, right? This may change, within families, within your communities. I'm definitely interested to hear from you how it is that, in your family you celebrate, or what are some rituals in your family that you do in terms of like when you process the grief. So I'm looking over the chat. Okay. Oh, I love this. In the Latino culture, no llores porque no los dejas descansar. And this is just an example, right, of grief, right? That we're trying to find a way to grieve, right? Where our emotions are real. We're crying because we're in pain. We miss our loved ones, right? and a way to kind of like, okay, like let me contain myself, let me not cry, as a way to cope. I love that you shared that. Okay. It feels like it just gets harder. 100%, Angelica. It gets harder, and there's days that are easier, there's days that are really hard. And with grief, right, it's one of those things that you're never prepared for, right? That there is no one way of how to grieve, right? We all experience it really differently, and that immense pain that we experience, right? It's something that it's really hard to bear. So I do want to normalize that. Okay, so moving now into how do we heal the grieving heart? Okay, so next I'm going to go into just providing different ideas and strategies, right? Some of these things perhaps you're already doing, some of these things maybe you've thought about doing them, or maybe these are just new ideas that you never thought. That could be a possibility for you. So the first thing first is that as much as we want to avoid the pain and our emotions, we have to acknowledge it. We have to sit with that pain. We have to allow ourselves to grieve. That is one of the ways that we will be able to grieve. Right now, another thing about grief, right? That just because you acknowledge the pain, right, and you allow yourself to grieve, it doesn't mean, right, that you're okay with what happened. I think a lot of it too is that our mindset, related to, our grieving can really get us stuck. That we think if we moved on or if we don't think about that person, that means that we forgot about them, right? So really pay attention to your thoughts as well. That it's okay, to feel a sense of emptiness and confusion as you experience, life without your loved one, right? That you will. There's gonna be times perhaps that you're gonna feel empty, you're gonna feel confused, and depending on what type of loss, because if let's say for example, you lost your partner, right? And your partner was the one that provided financial stability, right? In that case, right, that's going to create a whole layer of stress because now it's like this person is no longer here and they were the one providing. Now I'm the one that has to figure this out, right? So grief is not just about experiencing the pain that comes with it, but also the kind of like what happens after the fact. Accept that guilt is a common and normal feeling, as I was talking about earlier, that just because you feel guilty doesn't mean that you are guilty, right? And if you are feeling guilty, reflect why is it that you feel guilty? Where is the guilt coming from? And find a way, to cope with it. Being able to turn to your family and friends. I think this is the biggest one, right? Really seeking out your support system, right? To be there for you. If you just need a call and you just need a good cry or you need a hug, right? Knowing that your family and friends will be there to support you. Being able to talk about your loss, right? I know that talking about it can be really emotional. Maybe you don't want to cry or it can be triggering, but it is part of the process, right? Being able to talk about it and process it and move through it. And just by all of you guys being here today, I just want to commend you and praise you for being here, for being so brave, and for all of those who have been, sharing their losses in the chat. I do want to just praise you and let you know that you're being so brave, and I see you and I hear you, and that you sharing your story or you're sharing your loss is creating an impact here today and is normalizing for others that you're not alone in this. Um, so even being able to draw, seek out community, right? Like how you're doing right now. Being able, to, if let's say you're not ready to talk about your what your feelings with someone, being able to journal, write it out, drawing comfort from like your faith, right? Prayer, meditation, going to church, being able to also reflect on yourself, perhaps like you need to rediscover yourself? Do you need to create like new passions? Do you need to create like new hobbies? Um, Accepting that many people do feel awkward trying to comfort someone who's grieving, right? I think that when someone dies, right, it's really hard to like, how do you sit with that? Like, what do you say? And that's one of the things, as a therapist that comes a lot to me is, clients ask, well, what am I supposed to say? Like, how am I there? And just your physical presence, just by being there, just by saying, I'm sorry for your loss, that in itself, goes a long, long way. You don't have to have the perfect words. You don't have to have, the right thing to say. Just by physically being there, that already goes a long way. And please, as I'm sharing also these like, strategies or ideas, I also want to learn from you some things that you've also done in terms of like how to heal yourself. And doing that also allows other participants to see kind of what you um, done for yourself as well. Being able to prioritize, your self care, making sure that you're taking care of yourself, right? Imagine you're grieving, you're in pain, right? You're already emotionally a mess, right? And so it's really important to take care of your physical health, right? To make sure that you're eating, you're exercising, you're still doing things, for yourself. You're engaging in things that maybe in the moment you may not experience joy, but you're still doing something. Being able to establish boundaries, right? Sometimes, you need to allow yourself the space to be alone, to heal, to be unbothered, right? And if there's certain situations that are uncomfortable, or there's certain people that like constantly ask you about your loved one, it's okay to set those boundaries and say, like, listen, like, like if I'm going to be here, don't ask about so and so, or maybe not go to those events or those gatherings where that that things are going to be triggering for you. Being able to also plan ahead, right? So again, if you know that something's going to trigger you, whether it's like holidays or people, or certain dates, like being able to plan ahead, right? Prepare yourself for that. Know that you may have a crying, episode, or that you may get emotional, or that something will come up for you in that moment. It's okay to plan ahead of yourself and prepare yourself the best way that you can, right? And then lastly, if you feel that, these emotions, right, are just so unbearable and you need that extra support, right? Just because you go through grief and you experience intense sadness doesn't mean that you have a mental illness. It just means that, that this grief, right, after some time, if it starts like affecting your functioning, right, if it affects your ability to go to work, right, to do your day-to-day activities, and you need that extra support, I highly, highly encourage, right, that you seek out a therapist or a grief counselor that specializes in that to help you in your grieving process. All right, so I'm looking at the chat right now just to kind of see where everyone's at. And so I do want to share a few of the comments. Our experiences make us who we are, and we could help others who are going through the same experience. Absolutely, yes. Unfortunately, when my dad passed away, his family's true colors showed. Rather than offering support, they blamed me for his passing, making me feel guilty as if I did not make the right medical decisions. I'm so sorry to hear that about Patricia. I can see how that was, another layer of the grief, for you. And sometimes, yeah, sometimes the people that we think are going to be there are not there. And sometimes these situations really bring out the true colors of things. And then lastly, but just want to mention knowledge that I've noticed guilt in Latino males for coming to the U.S. and working to provide for their families in their home country. One thing I like to do with my tíos is talk to him about his kids and wife. I feel like sometimes other family members avoid talking to him about the topic. Absolutely, yes. Thank you for sharing that. All righty. So another thing I just want to acknowledge, right? Some of the traditions, right? That so one thing is like once we lose our loved ones, right, and time goes by, how do we continue to honor them? How do we celebrate them, right? And so one tradition that I think of, especially as Mexican American, is Dia de los Muertos, right? This is a day in November where we honor our loved ones, where we create some altares with special things that remind you of your loved one, um, where there's like specific like flowers, candles, photos, right? This is a tradition that also is true in other Latin American, countries as well. And so I'm also curious to know, what are rituals or traditions in your family? How it was it, if it's something that maybe you do partake in Dia de los Muertos, or perhaps you create your own, ritual within your family, in terms of how to honor your loved one. So please share on the chat if you would like. And then just so we can move along, I realize my presentations always have so much information and I want to cover so much and there's never time. um, but lastly, just want to leave you all again with just, different ways, right, of how you can continue, honoring your loved ones. Like Dia de los Muertos, that's just one specific day, right? But we don't have to wait for that day, right, to honor our loved ones, right? And so different things can be, lighting a special candle for that person, creating a scrapbook of memories of your loved one, depending on like, maybe participating in a charity event, going to the grave, right, taking flowers, creating a playlist of your loved one's favorite songs. So there's so many things that you can do, and really it's about holding true to what feels right for you, right? There's no, in this process there's no right or wrong. This is just, things that, people have tried, and some of these things work and some of them don't, and also honoring yourself in terms of where you are in your grieving process, right? And so, lastly, I also wanted to leave you guys with some resources. Since it is, I live in California, so I have a lot of resources in California, but the ones that I found that are more like national, statewide are these. There are helplines available for you that you can talk about your grief and loss. There's also specific national um, websites that I place there, whether you want to find a specific like grief group, right, in your state. If you want to find also like a chapter meeting. So these are just different, right here on the right, national websites in which perhaps you want a support group or you need more information in terms of grief. If let's say you want specific information in terms of your state, reach out to me, DM me directly, and I can help provide you some resources for that. Um, and so lastly, I want to leave some room for some Q&A. If anyone has any questions regarding anything that I talked about, um, anything that resonated with you, anything that, any words of wisdom that you want to share with others in terms of like what's worked for you, any ideas of, what other presentations you would like me to work on as well. This is the time to share your input, ask questions. I'm looking at the chat and I see that someone just shared that if I can just share, I love connecting with my dear loved ones through everyday activities. I associate my brother with yellow butterflies. I love that my uncle with paletas and raspados, I think, raspas, and my grandma with dirty dishes. Mis platos están enfermos, she would say. I love that. And that's exactly what it means, right? You creating whatever is going to be meaningful for you, right? Whatever is going to help you process and grieve, right? Because this is not an easy process. It's not an easy journey, and there's no timeline, there's no framework, right? These are just kind of things that have been researched. These are things that, for some it has worked, but it doesn't mean that it's going to work, for anyone. All righty. So just checking the chat. So someone else putting my daddy's ashes with his photos in his dining room. Awesome. Yeah. And that's another way, right? If, sometimes a burial is not, what the family decides. Sometimes is, cremating and having the ashes and where the ashes are, right? Um, all right. So I don't see any more questions. I'll hang around for like a minute or so. But again, I just want to thank you all. If you need any additional support, I am here. I said, in California. So if you are, meeting services, therapy services. I do have openings for that. If, let's say, you're looking more to, continue processes your healing, your grief, or you want to work on building a relationship with yourself, I do also offer coaching services as well, and that could be anyone, statewide, worldwide. But yes, thank you all for being here, for being so brave, and for sharing your ideas. Next week, we're going to get into mindfulness. And so I'm going to be teaching strategies on how to be more mindful in our everyday life. All righty. Well, again, thank you all for being here, and I will see you next Thursday. You guys have a wonderful night and continue being the amazing, empowering individuals that you are. And for those of you that have experienced a loss, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry that you went through that. I hope that you do something to take care of yourself today and every day as you continue. Alrighty. Bye everyone. See ya.